Welcome back to Decouple. Today I'm joined by returning guest Kalev Kallemets. Kalev is the co-founder and CEO of Fermi Energia. Kalev earned his PhD in energy economics from Tallinn University of Technology and has extensive private and public sector experience from an Estonian private energy company and the Ministry of Economic Affairs. Kalev, thank you so much for coming back on Decouple.
Hello, Chris.
These are dark times. You're joining us from Tallinn. You're a lot closer to me. I've got an Atlantic Ocean between myself and what's going on. In a way, in my homeland, I'm half Ukrainian. I do feel a little bit divorced from that culture and that history, third generation. But yeah, I am half Ukrainian, so I'm watching with shock from so far away. You're a lot closer to the action. I mean, first of all, let's just check in. How are you doing right now?
Personally, we're doing fine, and Estonia is a member of European Union and NATO from year 2004, and we feel very comfortable and secure in those positions. And Estonia is a stable, very free economy with lots of success stories despite its small size. And but indeed, what is going on 1,000 kilometers south of us is a war that broke up out this morning. The dictator Vladimir Putin committed a war crime by invading unprovoked peaceful nation of Ukraine on a very extensive manner by bombing first urban areas, military, some installations, and now from multiple fronts engaging with land forces. And the fighting is going on. Many people have died already, and the battles are raging, and Ukrainians are putting up very strong resistance. And I believe it's going to be a long war.
There's obviously been a number of motivations advanced by Putin and others, ranging from grand historic narratives to anxieties about NATO expansion. What's your best understanding as to why this step has been taken?
Yeah, obviously there are multiple considerations that are there, but I think the fundamental element is that Putin feels threatened that Ukraine could be successful as a democracy, a significant Slavic nation, the birthplace of Slavic countries, or of let's say later what became Russia. So the Kiev was the mother city of all Russian cities 1,000 years ago, and he feels that it would be a fundamental challenge to the autocracy that he has developed in Russia, that the public would see that it is possible for the Slavic nations to be non-corrupt, democratic, open media, open market societies like normal Western societies. And he feels fundamentally threatened by that. But obviously, in our podcast, your podcast, the energy is a strong angle. And here, in this situation, the energy is a very, 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 very strong angle. And one of the reasons why I do believe that that now has led to this conflict is that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline physically is completed. And Russia has believed that by pressuring since already mid last year, Germany and Europe in general to take that new pipeline into operation, thereby it is possible to not pipe this natural gas through Ukraine anymore, but directly from the Baltic Sea. And thereby Ukraine is not so vital for Russia anymore. And so So the strategic mistakes that Europe has made, specifically Germany, have led to that, have contributed to that war that we are seeing now.
Are you seeing that the kind of energy politics are affecting the kind of European unity or the unity of the West in responding to this, or in being insufficiently
yes,
strong in supporting Ukraine? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. The policy of Russia has always been, especially through sweet deals to specific bilateral deals to specific companies, specific nation states like Italy, Hungary, and Germany, specifically mostly Germany, specific companies like Wintershall, Uniper, providing kind of friend prices, thereby coercing political decision making, coercing kind of lobbying, funding, sponsoring, what have you, essentially corruption, to achieve what it wants, to de-unify European policymaking, to achieve its foreign policy objectives, that it would not be opposed, and that European nations would be subservient to its foreign policy objective, which is to control to make nations dependent on Russia. And so this, to some extent, that has contributed to the conflict that we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard two sort of justifications for what many of us have perceived as the irrationality of Germany making itself so dependent upon Russia, particularly for its gas exports. And two of those stated rationales. One was, we should buy lots of Russian gas as a form of reparations for what, the war crimes that Germany committed within Russia, within Eastern Europe. And the other was around, if we integrate our two economies, it's going to make a great war between Europe or Germany and Russia far less likely. It's turning out quite differently.
Yeah, that was the ideal Wandel durch Handel, so change through exchange, essentially. The idea from 1972 of the social democratic government of Willy Brandt, that they built the first Druzhba oil pipeline, the first gas pipeline, that it started to move from there. So it has some heritage. And I'm a part German myself, and I understand fully German language and also the psyche. And one element, the important element, is that Germans are quite anti-American, and also from the period of before the First World War, they are also quite leftist in their attitudes, and so these attitudes inspire certain admiration to Russia, that was the Bolshevik socialist ideal for much of the left of the West, and carried the torch of anti-Americanism, anti-imperialism, so to say. So that is a strong part of the narrative, and a strong reason why nuclear is perceived as an American technology, which it is, and therefore has been systematically opposed by the left. And the left has always had this pro-Russian narrative, and reaching kind of a friendship with the East, and not to be dependent on the Americans. So this is the dualism of Germany, and that continues to this very day. But I'm very pleased that at least for the new government, the Green, very surprisingly, the Green government on its foreign policy is much more value-based, and much more like this century thinking, and they reject the Nord Stream 2 on the grounds of that being democratic, with anti-democratic Russia. So the developments in Germany are really complex, and this war, which is so affront to rules-based international order. And rules-based is something that is so essential to German, let's say, statehood and how they think about international things. So this war, I follow the news from Germany and their statements, really has fundamentally upset any pro-Russian feelings that Germans might have had in their political elite. And I believe Nord Stream 2 is there for sure. And there will be new thinking in European mainstream because of that. And I would venture into that a little bit later in depth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're definitely moving in that direction. Just, I guess, one more question on the events of the last 12 hours. Like, are you shocked by how brazen it's all been? Typically with the military intervention of this size, there's some kind of a false flag or some kind of a justification. I mean, this was just such a naked act of aggression without any kind of narrative justification that I'm used to seeing in previous interventions, whether it's the kind of incubator baby narrative around the invasion of Iraq in response to its occupation of Kuwait. Like there's usually something more there. Like this seems shocking. This seems like a real before and after moment in world history that we're seeing right now. It changes the rules of the game. Absolutely, today is history, and this is absolutely changing the future of our children. And everyone will remember today as we remember where we were and what we did during 9/11. So this will shape, of course, for decades, European international politics for sure. And we do not know the full outcome of this. But what I'm absolutely confident that Ukrainians are hard fighters. They will resist. They will fight. They will happily die for their country, like they have done so since 2014. And I'm proud about them. And Russians will suffer hard. And I really strongly believe also that the West will win eventually, like we won the wars against the fascists and the Nazis. I mean, the West as a collective, despite that the beginning was a bit bumpy and hard. But I strongly believe that Ukraine and West will win against Russia. And the important part of that fight is energy. And now we move forward on that topic. Absolutely, yeah. So let's talk about the implications, how the rules of the game have changed. When I was in COP26, speaking with Stefan Haufe, the German spokesperson for their whole delegation there, we talked a lot about the phase out of coal and what the plan was going forward to balance out their enormous renewables fleet, and it was gas, and Nord Stream 2 didn't really seem to bother him that much. And he didn't have another answer in terms of what was going to replace that going forward. There's talk, I believe, within the German government, I think it was the chancellor who said that they're needing to have a quick reevaluation of their energy system in the aftermath of this intervention, or even in the build up to it. What are you seeing as the likely developments here? What's happening even as we speak?
As we speak, my compatriot Commissioner for Energy in European Commission, Kadri Simpson, I know her well. She has been touring for 2 weeks the world for LNG, and so we're trying to get as much LNG to Europe as possible. Unfortunately, the Germans have not built any LNG terminals on the hope of this pipeline. But the LNG import capabilities, I think, are not so bad. But what is the problem is the LNG supply itself. And so as much as I know, vast majority of the cargoes are contracted already. So getting hands on new LNG requires much higher prices. And this is what we're seeing today. the prices have moved really high, almost close to record highs. So I believe that moving into next year, the reservoirs will be also record empty. Without Russian supplies, we going into winter 2023, 22, 23, the reservoirs will be maybe 60% or so, even lower than they were 6 months ago. So it means that the prices will remain for gas and power will be remaining high for several years, and this is the analytic view as well. So, and the reason is Russia is essentially has abandoned the spot market. They're fulfilling their long contracts, but they're not supplying additional supplies to the short market. Not selling, and so it will be very challenging. But the best expectation is that somehow it will be possible to muddle through. One important delta there that obviously I've talked to many people in Belgium and Poland and other places is that it is imperative to maintain the existing nuclear units operational. I believe also the coal units, unfortunately, must stay operational, will not be phased out as in the original plans. So that's definitely disappointing in the terms of CO2 emissions. Also, last year it was very disappointing for the European Union in terms of CO2 emissions. The renewable build-out will proceed, but this pace cannot be due to the supply chain, but also the permitting issues and all of those objective bottlenecks. It can't be, made double faster. So the same is true with LNG. I worked in the energy business, and I know that the development cycle is just so long to have the permits in place, to have a specific construction projects, the construction teams, the supplies. So essentially building a new LNG train in Sabine Pass or anywhere in the Gulf Coast, even if you have all the permits in place, takes three years, just construction. So, and I know in Canada, there are multiple LNG projects, but they're not progressing so well, right? So that is the reality of energy business, that the lead times are very substantial.
Yeah, I mean, geopolitical considerations are going to be smashing up hard against climate goals, and that's going to catch big LNG producers I'm thinking mostly of the USA here in a real conundrum in terms of how the Biden administration moves forward with their policy, whether keeping Europe fueled is going to trump their carbon cutting commitments. There's Roger Pielke's iron law of electricity, which is basically that you'll cut down the last tree to keep your kids warm at night. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out on the geopolitical front. What do you anticipate? Do you think the U.S. is going to ramp up its LNG in order to help its EU allies through the next few years?
It's already ramped up, but the only delta is that instead of supplying, Chinese customers, supplying European customers. And obviously it will make some Chinese customers unhappy. So I don't know how it is possible, but somehow it has to work out, I know. And so we are definitely going to see much more stronger geopolitical element to energy this year and coming years than we were accustomed to, let's say, market mechanisms and marketplace, especially in gas. So it's going to be very, very tough, I believe, for Europe, because the gas, its own gas production in offshore, onshore, it's in decline. Also, what is reality also when it comes to coal, the problem is not that we want to close coal, but also the coal plants are old, and also the coal itself, the brown coal, the lignite, and also the black coal, it's out. It's just physically out. And so there's this very significant crunch, for example, in Poland that and also in Estonia, where we have significant capacities that will be just, you can't make 70-year-old man run a marathon every day. He will die.
Right.
The same is with fossil plants. They are limited lifetime capacities.
In terms of Europe's own endogenous energy resources, as you were saying, the offshore North Sea gas fields of the UK are running dry. The Dutch aren't pulling much more out because they're getting earthquakes now. I guess Norway's still producing, and the coal fields you're saying are drying out in Germany and Poland to a degree. I mean, this is a situation of almost utter energy dependence. Is fracking is still
yes, it's very bad.
Off the cards? Do you think that's going to change?
No, in Europe. We have zero fracking. The geology is different, and also the environmental permitting, and so also in UK, the last company had to pull the plug. So it's zero. It's very bad, and that's why we need to deploy small modular reactors.
Right. So let's go there. First off, though, I don't want to speak for you, but for myself, it was pretty astounding seeing a real sea change in the public discourse about nuclear, how it's discussed, the prominence in the media of really sensible narratives coming out of nuclear as a result of the European energy crisis of this year, pre-war. It's quite incredible how much the discourse shifted. And I think, due to this tragedy, it's likely that the discourse is going to further shift, again, given what we've just described in terms of Europe's incredibly narrow options for keeping the lights on. So yeah, let's shift gears into what you just mentioned there. What do you see as the prospects and solutions beyond trying to ramp up LNG production and offload tankers? And particularly, how do we stay on track with decarbonization?
Yeah, so I don't know about decarbonization, but what really, indeed, I think hinted on is the taxonomy discussion we had in Europe, and in January, indeed, the European Commission came out with its official proposal on the it's called Complementary Delegated Act on Taxonomy of Sustainable Finance, where nuclear, on specific conditions, that there is a final repository for spent nuclear fuel by 2050, and some certain other conditions like accident tolerant fuel utilization. If those technical requirements, and there are, let's say, a couple of pages more, technical requirements are being met, then nuclear energy, new investments, but also life extensions can be considered sustainable. And this is really important in terms of the cost of capital for new investments, and because it's so capital intensive, that is really vital. But it's also a clear political message to European community. It is obviously resisted by the stupid Austrians and the Luxembourgians and the Germans who consume nuclear energy, but incredibly have some kind of a mental problem with opposing production of nuclear energy. So definitely real historic sea change. I think that greenies and so whoever are opposing nuclear energy are just a kind of a noise with which they are making for internal political and organizational reasons, is essentially irrelevant. So now the only challenge and the main challenge is actual deployment, and this is a problem. As Mark Nelson has discussed, the successes or failures of large nuclear deployment the last 20 years, there are serious problems. There are serious problems with large nuclear. It's not only that we do not have the experience and the companies a little bit are, let's say, not so good doing their work, not so good, and other items or the regulatory things. But I believe that there is really important is also to understand that the plants themselves have grown so large, so complex. The VVR in 1,200 megawatt is 50 different buildings. So 50 different buildings and structures to build at the same time to have this 1,200 megawatt running and licensed. It's so massive project that has to execute everything so well in chain reaction. So it's very likely that these do not work out so well if you do not have like very continuously done that. And so therefore and looking at also our good friends in Poland and Czech Republic and France and in England deploying and preparing for large nuclear, how slowly it goes. I have to say I'm disappointed. I cannot see, unfortunately, how large nuclear can make a significant dent in the decarbonization and energy security in such as well. I mean, it pains me to say that. I really would like it to be. I really would. Mm-hmm. But it is not for real practical reasons, not for political, but more so practical reasons. And one very important element about SMRs, people fail to a little bit understand who are not practical in the energy, is financing. Getting 8 billion, 10 billion together is a huge, monumental challenge. And so financing 1 billion deployment project or 2 billion deployment projects is a substantially more doable for more exponentially more players, and which means that the market is substantially larger, and you're able to de-risk the supply chain, the deployment much quicker. And time is really, really, really important in energy.
Yeah. No, time is of the essence here. The way in which the world has changed in the last 12 hours is very likely to lead to further divisions in the world in terms of our supply chains. And the degree to which, say in Finland, it was palatable to be working on a VVER. You're suggesting to me in our pre-interview that could have shifted. The reality is that the people building nuclear plants well and on time are all coming from countries outside of the West's sort of sphere of influence. And if these technologies become polarized in terms of their supply chains, the West is going to have to sort of look within itself to find that capacity. A lot of it, which has been offshored through deindustrialization. So what do you see as the prospects? Who would be
Chris, I wouldn't idealize
the companies or the countries that would...
I wouldn't idealize Chinese or the Russians. I know from people working inside Russian-led projects that their management is autocratic, very subservient to top superior managers, not thinking for themselves too much, little bit overstaffing, and not being innovative and open to and so these are fundamental problems. They are very good in stealing and repeating stuff, but not so good in actually getting into new environments and also executing better and better and better every time. So I wouldn't idealize the VVR and the Rosatom supply chain. Neither the Chinese. I've heard also many practical stories on how they kind of do not pay appropriate attention to safety and the quality, what would be necessary. But nevertheless, I mean, we in the West, we indeed have to deal with our own challenges. And here, indeed, looking at our financial and energy market environment and other realities, then the SMRs, I strongly believe, based on practical discussions and experiences and planning, I cannot see how really large nuclear can be even a competitive play compared to SMRs moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was speaking just in reference to getting power plants on the grid on budget and on time. That's something that China and Russia have accomplished to a greater degree than the West in the last 20 years. Anyway, I think we could agree on that. But it does lead us to this question. I mean,
the Turkey project is very expensive.
Sure. Okay, well, we can leave it there. But in terms of you've taken a great interest in my backyard here in Ontario, where at Darlington, really the first SMR of its kind is in terms of this new model that we're seeing is being planned, and shovels are supposed to be in the ground very soon. A lot of eyes are on this BWRX 300 that's going to be built at Darlington. So tell me why. I think I was trying to lead into this, that if the West is having to look to itself a lot more and to its own supply chains, particularly for strategic industries like energy, why Canada, in your opinion, is going to have a major role and responsibility in this?
Yeah, the more I learn, the more I'm impressed about Canada. That it's a little bit like Estonia, that kind of not too prominent, and people are kind of how to say, not too boasting and stuff like that, and quietly, systematically have a really good ecosystem of nuclear energy, meaning that the regulator is good, the market is system with this pricing mechanism in Ontario is good, that the nuclear supply chain is good. You have the only heavy forging manufacturing facility in the North America in Canada, 100 kilometers from Toronto in Cambridge. You have excellent fuel supply capabilities in Cameco, and you have excellent track record in execution refurbishment in Darlington, but also in Bruce, and you have multiple companies, not one single EDF, but multiple companies, little bit competing with each other in terms of who is executing better. And I really congratulate also on this way where there is a Bruce Energy company and then OPG, which so that all the assets are and the operation is not totally monopolized. And so I think it's a vibrant environment. And obviously Canada is a little bit northern nation than compared to United States or many European nations. So it's not as northern latitude as Estonia, but more close to the setting we have in Finland and Sweden, where energy is really needed, and this the renewable is just objectively is not can provide relevant quantities of energy that is needed for the population.
I was pretty astounded. A friend of mine was pointing out that the Canadian GDP is actually larger than that of Russia. That was a shock to me.
Wow.
And I think, yeah. I mean, it was a big shock because I just think about, what we're capable of doing in terms of our industrial output, maybe confining that to nuclear. It's nice to hear your rosy words. And I've definitely heard that assessment before, that Canada, is a nuclear leader, and particularly in the West. And of course, I have high expectations, but certainly we do have, as you're mentioning, a really active refurbishment industry. The largest infrastructure project in the country is the refurbishment of our CANDUs at Darlington and Bruce. So there's something going on here. It's certainly not anything like the Russians building, gigawatt scale reactors all over the world, but it's a start. And I do like the idea of us being able to play a greater role, and for there being a sort of geopolitical imperative to do that. I think is going to be quite interesting.
So Chris, I would make a very strong point here. Very strong point here that look, Norwegian Equinor is very active player from Norway, which is 6 million nation, so smaller than Ontario, is a very active player globally in many oil and gas plays. The Vestas and Ørsted from Denmark, which is also a smaller nation than maybe Alberta, is very active player globally in offshore and onshore wind. So I do believe really what you say that Canada has been kind of successful in exporting to Romania, Argentina, South Korea, to China even, and some other nations this CANDU technology. And now with deployment of first SMR that is really simple, efficient, very safe, really based on experience, I do really strongly believe that Canada has a strong opportunity to not only to export technology and know-how, but also contribute financially, take the lead in some deployment projects to accelerate decarbonization. I was astounded to find out that Canada still imports oil from Russia and from Nigeria. So you're still burning a lot of oil and gas. So you, Canada, need to decarbonize, of course, as well. But you have a responsibility to export. Look, I had the responsibility from I don't know, I had the experience, I had the know-how, my life led to me to establish the company that I had. But so Canada having these ecosystems, these capabilities, this is not just, gift from God. In the historic situation where we find ourselves, right, of decarbonization being absolute global imperative, we have to bloody do it. And we have to do it with everything we can. And also we have to defend democracy. We have to do it. Otherwise we will be conquered. And so Canada, therefore, is not just kind of some bystander hobbit in a shire or somewhere. You are part of this world. You do have a responsibility. And therefore it is your duty and obligation to provide the world, to help the world to decarbonize. It is not just empty words, but this has to mean action by Canada as a state, Canadians as a people.
So how do you anticipate folks like yourselves from Europe interacting with the Canadians or gaining from our experience? I mean, it's optimistically that reactor in Darlington will be on the grid in 2028. That's still quite some time away. So far there's been a lot of
there's a lot of work,
a lot of planning, but yeah. So can that work that's been done help streamline the processes that you're attempting to do to speed up this SMR revolution in the EU?
I don't like fancy words like.
Or does that contribution come later?
Like at all. No, that contribution is absolutely moving forward, and this is the right kind of mind frame that there has to be work, and the work is ongoing. I don't want to be specific here publicly, but we have really good partnership with multiple partners in Canada in planning activities and doing a lot of work this year and coming years in really learning on Canadian experience. But I would have to say, if I would have a discussion with your Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, I would emphasize to him that what I said earlier, that it is not just a nice thing that is going on in Ontario, but this is really important that should have national significance and international significance, especially talking today, especially in the light of that the carbon emissions in 2021 increased globally, unfortunately, not decreased. What is supposed to be happening, and what is really unfortunately, we are moving forward in this century in direction of 3.5 or so 4 degrees scenario instead of 2 or 1.5. So things are bad, really bad, and there has to be much more stronger focus on all technologies, on renewables, but also very strong focus on nuclear.
Yeah, no, it is. I think climate is going to drop in terms of where it sits in terms of how we ascribe importance in the light of these big geopolitical twists and turns. As you were saying, with the immediate needs probably being met by fossil fuels, and the need for those industries to be further invested in and developed in order to make up for what's being cut off from Russia, or what Russia will not supply anymore. That's a tough pill to swallow.
And so. I do believe. I as a responsible person, I have to look forward what is going to happen this year and next year and year after that and so forth, in terms of my business and my country and the world and the general environment. And it is absolutely undeniable that we're going to have very, very bad news when it comes to forest fires, desertification, and glacier melts, and extreme weather events this year. Worse year after that, worse year after that, worse year after that. The coral reefs are going to die. Ecosystems are going to be disrupted. There is going to be continuous bad news that we cannot anymore influence. This is beyond our control. We have done so much sinning on this carbon front that there's going to be, there's absolutely certain that coming decades will be many, many bad news.
Well, Kalev, I think we'll leave it there. I hate to leave it on the note of your final words being bad news. So I want to give you a chance to speak a few more. I guess like what I'm really thinking about again is sort of if there's a new iron curtain falling to some degree, and the West is going to need to be more self-reliant by virtue of the kind of sanctions that will need to be put in place. It remains to be seen how China is going to fall into this, whether they will seize the opportunity to annex Taiwan. I mean, I'm getting into some hypotheticals here, but this could really lead to a profoundly divided world. Global decarbonization would obviously be a much more successful project if there was unprecedented cooperation, economic cooperation. The West has lost so much of its capacity. It's deindustrialized and it's weakened its energy systems. It gives me great pause and great concern, thinking about how we can, especially if we're having to sort of go it on our own, reindustrialize in order to have the capacity to rapidly expand the energy systems that we'll need to decarbonize. That's a big challenge. Again, I'm leaving us in a downer here as well, but I'll pass the mic back to you for.
Yeah, and I would continue on the kind of a realistic path that I believe that the autocratic petrostate and the fossil states like Russia, like Algeria, like Kazakhstan, and Saudi Arabia, and Iran, they will not, and also China that is reliant on coal, they will not decrease carbon emissions based on our hopes and expectations, because these fossil fuels are the essence of the power vertical that is in the autocratic nations that controls the power of the oligarchy or the corruption, what we would like to call, but essentially feudalism. And they will not give up power. And so what we have to do as West, who has developed essentially all the technologies that we're using today, we have developed those technologies, including nuclear energy, over the last 100 years. We have to develop now superior technologies that reduce cost, enhance prosperity, and are superior to fossil technologies in terms of energy density. And unfortunately, despite the positive impacts of renewables, the only technology that can do that, I'm sure your guests know and listeners very well, is nuclear energy. But we have to do it much, much, much better, and much better technologies. And I can't see that the large nuclear is going to provide that. So therefore, and I can't also see that the advanced nuclear is going to provide that. So we have to go for as simple and efficient SMRs as possible. And therefore, the Darlington project is absolutely essential, together with some other SMRs that have to deploy, not providing disappointments, but providing excellence, providing new hope, and that would be emulated, deployed, financed in significant numbers in democratic nations. So this century has to be rebirth of nuclear energy, or we will fail in decarbonization and decoupling, what your podcast is about. So that would be my positive note. And Canada has a strong responsibility, strong opportunity here. And I very much hope that the Canadian youth and the nation as such will rise to the occasion and will do what is necessary to do for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think on our energy front we're used to thinking about things in such geopolitically significant terms. But thank you for introducing that into the discourse. Kalev, it's a pleasure to chat.
Welcome to the world.
Thanks again for joining us. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Chris.